Mike Zimmer's defense was absolutely fantastic in week 1, but they'll need to be even better in week 2. We'll break it all down on this crossover edition of the Locked On Saints and Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today from Locked On Saints is, of course, Ross Jackson. You can follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. On today's show, we're going to break down this fantastic matchup between two of the best offenses in the NFL. Ross, maybe?
Maybe. We'll see.
Let's talk about the Saints. What's the biggest storyline on offense going into this contest?
Yeah, I think the biggest storyline is, are they one of the best offenses in the NFL? They sure looked like it last week up against the Carolina Panthers. The issue is that was the Carolina Panthers. And so now the big question is how much of it was about how bad the Carolina Panthers are versus how good the New Orleans Saints might have become with new offensive coordinator Clay Kubiak and their new offensive system. One of the things that I've been telling folks for a while here with this conversation is that if you look at what it is that the Saints independently did, not how they did, but what they independently did, which was infuse a lot more. I think it was a jump of over 33% in motion into their offense, infusing. They went from Derek Carr's play action drop back percentage last year was 14.8%. Marcus, in that game against Carolina, it was 40%, 1-4 to 4-0. So a big leap there and doing something that Derek Carr excels in and all that. And so I tend to try to look at the things that New Orleans actually did that are kind of independent of what the opponent across from them settles or might look like. And I think that's a big test now for New Orleans coming into this game up against the Dallas Cowboys in a fantastic defense and one of the brightest defensive minds in Mike Zimmer as head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen referred to him in his media availability earlier this week. This is a real opportunity for them to prove whether or not they are indeed a good offense.
And Ross, I want to know, Chris Olave really wasn't involved too much. It was Rashid Shaheed that got the big touchdown early in this game. Do you expect a bigger role from Olave kind of as the season goes along?
Oh yeah, he's going to get his. He's going to get his for sure. This is just kind of harkening back to maybe the earlier success days of Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints offense, to where it's not going to be the same player every game that's going to be the key focus. They're going to move things around and then do things based on matchup that end up helping them out. So I would absolutely expect Chris Olave to be a big part of what the Saints do throughout the season. And I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a greater focus in that starting this week. When you got a top flight number one guy, you can't let him go two games with 16 receiving yards. You know what I mean?
What is it? The squeaky wheel gets the grease here.
That's right.
Olave is like, hey, a couple targets. I want a little bit more. Hey, I want to ask you about the offensive line, because we'll get to the Cowboys side of this in a little bit, but the Cowboys pass rush is really good. Talise Fuaga starting at left tackle for the Saints, and I believe it's Trevor Penning at right tackle. How did those young tackles perform in week 1?
Much better, but they perform much better than we expected going up against one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. If you ask
That's what's so hard about week 1.
Yeah, it's so hard, man. Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes some teams just come stumbling out of the gate and things like that. Like, you just never know. And so our good friend Julian Council from over at Locked On Panthers talked about the Carolina Panthers being the worst pass rushing team in the NFL going in. And look, when you trade away Brian Burns for, a bag of peanuts, I guess, you're probably going to end up in that situation. But I will say this, I think that, we saw Trevor Penning struggle against second, third string pass rushers on the offensive line all throughout the preseason. And so call it whatever you want. One of those guys is Jadeveon Clowney. Another one is Derek Brown. Like, there's still some talent on that. Well, it was Derek Brown until unfortunately had that season in the injury. But like, there's still some talent on that Carolina defensive line. So you very well could have seen Trevor Penning struggle at right tackle. You very well could have seen a rookie in the NFL getting his first start in Tali Fuanga going out there and playing for the first time in his career. You could have seen him struggle, but they didn't. And so so I think that there's still positives to take from that. But of course, this week will be a big time test for that offensive line going up against Dallas's pass rush.
And Ross, let's talk about the Saints defense, because you look at like a depth chart, like you go to our lads and you look at the depth chart and they're loaded. Like they have talent everywhere. And I know this is the Panthers offense that they went up against in week 1, but it's still an NFL team and they look fantastic. What's your outlook for this Saints defense throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, my outlook on them is that they should be a top 10 defense again. And really, like you mentioned the roster, they have the roster to get back to where they were 2017, 2018, 2019. We were talking about a top 5, top 3 defense. One of the things I'm most excited to watch in this matchup, Marcus, is how much I'm going to learn about defenses, watching Mike Zimmer do it from his perspective and watching Dennis Allen do it from his perspective, and just the aggression that comes with it and all that. And so I think that, when it comes down to what I'm really looking for from the Saints in terms of something that they need to prove this week, it kind of just comes down to the pass rush. That the coverage is solid. They look great in run defense over the course of the preseason and this year with the opening game up against Carolina. We'll see if they can continue that, of course. But really for me, it's, can you get after Dak Prescott and can you disrupt his timing with some stellar wide receiver options, including former New Orleans Saint Brandon Cooks, who once got traded away for saying closed mouths don't get fed. Not squeaky wheel gets the oil, but all those things. And so it's a good group over there, and not limited to just those guys. But the big thing is, and this maybe is where the offseason addition of Chase Young comes into real effect for New Orleans, is that he's familiar with what Dak Prescott likes, where he likes to bail, where he likes to run, all those other things. Could that potentially help the Saints, whether it's him helping or whether it's just the information that he shares helping their pass rush?
And I was going to mention, it's an old friend alert from Chase Young with his days with Washington. Now the Cowboys are starting a rookie left tackle, making his second start. I've got to imagine that's a matchup that the Saints are going to want to attack, and Chase Young probably going to line up over there. How did he perform in week 1?
He led the team in pressures right off the bat. I mean, he actually hit it was 2 times as many pressures as the next leading guy, with 6 in the game. So he was immediately disruptive. And really, even though he never got to the quarterback in terms of getting a sack, he is part of the reason why slot corner Alontae Taylor ended up becoming the first ever New Orleans Saints defensive back with 3 sacks in a game, is because Alontae Taylor just followed him to the quarterback. And so it just ended up working out pretty well there. So it's a pretty good example of how sometimes the sack numbers might not be there, but the impact that player creates in terms of generating opportunities for other players ends up having a major benefit. And I think that's what we saw last Sunday.
I just have one more question on the Saints. Demario Davis, how has he continued to be the most underrated linebacker in the NFL? All the guy does is make 1 million tackles every year, stay healthy. I don't get it. I mean, he's still incredible.
His recovery and preparation regimen is absolutely remarkable. Like, it should be something that is documented and shared across the NFL. It's insane the amount of work that he does on himself so that he can be ready for those Sunday games. And boy, when he's ready, he's absolutely ready, isn't he? I mean, the guy just keeps making plays. Why he's so underrated, I have no idea. Maybe it's because
so good forever. I don't get it.
Maybe it's because he's not the quintessential, pass rushing linebacker. For instance, he's not a Micah Parsons, right? To where you have that conversation. Is he an off-ball line? Well, not an off-ball linebacker, but is he a linebacker or is he an edge rusher? And you kind of go, whatever, he's a pass rusher, right? He's a do-it-all, like, elite player. And I think you look at Demario Davis from a similar perspective, just playing a different position. Like, he's typically an off-ball linebacker, but also 6.5 sacks in each of the last 2 years has been his career high in both of those years. So he just keeps getting better and better, man. Age is like a fine wine.
Yeah, if you're a football junkie and you just want to pay attention to one player in this game, watch Davis. He's all over the field. He's so smart. I just know, as a football fan, I can't wait to watch him on Sunday. Yeah. I'm a little bit nervous about what he might do to this Cowboys offense. And speaking of which, Ross, let's break down this Cowboys offense going into week 2 next. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day foods, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a single play. I've been to hundreds of football parties over the last few years, and unfortunately, there's been several times where I show up to my buddy's house and there's either no food or a very unimpressive spread. But DoorDash is here to save us this football season. You can order pizza, wings, burgers, whatever you want on DoorDash, and you never have to leave your couch. Use our promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol only available in certain markets. This episode is brought to you by Hims. No man wants to lose their hair, but for men, it's actually very common. And now with Hims, the solution is simple. Try Hims hair loss solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who got their flow back. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your couch. They offer personalized chewables, oral, sprays, and serum treatment options so that you can find out what works the best for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/LockedOnNFL. That is HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL for your personalized hair loss treatment options. HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Welcome back to the Locked On Saints and Locked On Cowboys crossover edition of the podcast. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Make your second listen to Locked On NFL Show. We've got a new Locked On NFL Show, 2 shows every single day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with our guy Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the local Locked On experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insights, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we are here with Ross Jackson, who you can follow on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys going into week 2. They're home for the first time this season. Ross, the first time since a certain playoff game that we don't have to mention that happened last year. I kind of blocked that one out.
Yeah.
It's a little rough. The biggest story here for the Cowboys is, can the offense get going? I know they put up 30 whatever points last week, but they had a kick or a punt return for a touchdown. In the second half, I believe they had 2 first downs in the second half against Cleveland. Can this offense start to look like what it did at the end of last year? And I got to be honest, Ross, I'm a little bit nervous about it because, again, you look at the personnel on the Saints defense, they are loaded. We'll see if Marshon Lattimore plays in this game. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury. Is this a Brandon Cooks revenge game? Yes, maybe.
Could be. I think that this is a really interesting one because for New Orleans, like, this is a really, really good offense for the Dallas Cowboys. This is a real opportunity here for them to be able to kind of see what an offense, a real offense, the NFL offense looks like. I mean, Carolina is like trying to figure things out with Bryce Young and all that. Is just as much a test for the New Orleans Saints defense as it is for their offense in terms of what they have to prove coming into this one. So I think Dallas is gonna take it to them a little bit, but you got to feel pretty confident about things with Dak now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice when you get your franchise quarterback signed to a big deal. I mean, I was as somebody who has to do content every day, I was dreading the idea of having to talk about Dak Prescott's contract for like the 365th day in a row. Like, that sounded no fun at all. So I'm really excited that we could actually just talk about football now.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest stories for the Cowboys this year, Ross, is if they are going to be a team that's going to contend in the NFC and not just win 10, 11, 12 games, but actually be contenders, it's can they run the ball when their opponent knows that they're going to run the ball? And that was the issue last year. As much as I love Tony Pollard, there were times where teams would load up and the Cowboys had zero effectiveness on the ground. I think this is another good challenge with the Saints front seven. Can Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, and whoever else they decide to put in that backfield, can they run the ball on this really stout Saints defense? Again, last week, we can't tell much from that Panthers game, but I think this is going to be a good opportunity for the Cowboys to see where their run game is at going into week 2.
Yeah, and that conversely works pretty well in terms of what it is that New Orleans wants their focus to be on, right? Like they want to be able to stop the run. They were the number 22 run defense in the NFL last year, which is kind of unprecedented for where they had been as a top 10 run defense from about 2017 until 2022 or 2021, excuse me. And so them coming in with sort of this concerted effort of revamping and helping out their run defense and, revamping their front seven a little bit in terms of additions more than anything else. That's going to be a big focus for them as well. So these two in the run game, offense and defense, the Cowboys and the Saints should clash pretty well in terms of what it is that they're each trying to prove.
And what I'm looking forward to seeing the most in this game is Mike Zimmer. Week one was fantastic. The Cowboys defense was so good in week one that nobody talked about the Cowboys defense. It was, should the Browns cut bait with Deshaun Watson? Should they take the $170 million dead cap hit because he looks so bad? I actually think a lot of that credit goes to Zimmer. I mean, he did some wild things that I don't think Watson and Kevin Stefanski were thinking at all. After the game, Trayvon Diggs said, we only use 3 pressure packages. And Mike Zimmer's got about 50 to 60 that he's going to deploy. I want to see what it looks like against the Saints because Derek Carr is a completely different type of quarterback than Deshaun Watson. He'll stand in the pocket and throw the ball down the field. How does his defense react and how do they play against an entirely different style of offense here in week 2?
Yeah, it's going to be big for both of these sides. And look, I do think, maybe this is just me and my bold predictionness and things like that. But going into the season, one of the things that I did say was that Cleveland Browns fans would be asking for Jameis Winston to start by week 4 or week 5 over in Cleveland because I thought Deshaun Watson. I think I gave Deshaun too much credit. Well, let me not say it like that, but I gave him too much for what it comes to with this. And so I think that Deshaun Watson probably was terrible enough to kind of have that conversation, but I think the Dallas Cowboys defense really did it to him. And the fact that, there's defenders over in Dallas saying, well, we only use 3, pressure packages and everything. It just kind of shows you all right, well, there's so much more to come. And this is why I love kind of going from week 1 into week 2 is to figure out, okay, how much did what all of these teams show or have, how much of that did they actually show and everything. And so we'll get an idea of that. I am, you mentioned being a little bit nervous about, Demario Davis and what he does to the Dallas Cowboys offense. I'm very nervous about what Mike Zimmer does to the New Orleans Saints offense because they're coming off of this high of this 47-10 thrashing of the Carolina Panthers, and they're not going to be able to ride that momentum into this game. They're going to have to be ready to reset from zero, and guys like Micah Parsons and Mike Zimmer and this Dallas Cowboys defense is not going to make it easy on them.
So we did an episode with Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings all the way back in February. And when the Cowboys lost Dan Quinn, I think a lot of Cowboy fans were upset, right? Their defense had been really good over the last 3 years with Dan Quinn. We spoke to Luke and he's like, dude, you guys have no idea what you're in for. You are going to love Mike Zimmer.
He's a maniac.
And he is a maniac. And the last time that Zimmer was in Dallas, he ran a very vanilla basic defense. You look at what he's doing now. It's almost weird, Ross. I'm almost more excited when the defense is on the field just because Zim is a madman. If you like really deep, fun football and really complex defense, I cannot wait to see these two coaches go at it. I think they're two of the best in the league right now.
Yeah, and look, there's a good chance too with Mike McCarthy's offense, and if Clint Kubiak's offense looks as good last week or some version of it, some percentage of what it looked like last week, then we really could be watching kind of a game of chess matches all throughout this one because Mike Zimmer is going to force your offense to adjust. Clint Kubiak's trying to make Mike Zimmer adjust back and forth between Dennis Allen and Mike McCarthy. To me, the coaching matchups are just as fun as the player matchups in this one because it's not so often that you kind of get to watch a game like this where every coach that's calling plays is a master of their craft. I feel like we're very lucky that we get to see this game. Very lucky that this game is early in the season too, so that they have, for the most part, the full complement of their pieces on that chessboard.
All right, let's break down what each team needs to do to secure a victory and improve to 2-0 in week 2. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Listen, as a Cowboy fan who lives in Pennsylvania, I've had to have Sunday Ticket for the last 20 years, and I absolutely love it. I cannot imagine my life without it. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. With a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. And go visit FanDuel right now. They've got all the lines available for week 2. The Dallas Cowboys are 6.5-point favorites over the Saints. I think that's a very interesting line. Go check out that total as well. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. It's a crossover edition of the Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Saints podcast. We are discussing the biggest keys to victory for the Cowboys and the Saints. Because you're the road team, Ross, why don't you go ahead and give us some things that you're looking for in this contest?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this one really comes down to kind of 3 big things for me. I want to see the New Orleans Saints play to their brand, and that goes for both sides of the football. They can't necessarily be worried. So many people outside of the facility are focused on who the opponent is. The Saints need to be focused on who they are and what their identity is and playing to that identity, right? Like that's got to be the biggest thing for them. There's a big issue for them last year was not having an identity, not necessarily feeling like they had a DNA in terms of what they were foundationally. That can't be the case here this season. And this is a game to where you have to prove that you can maintain who you are despite who you're lined up across from. So I think that becomes really important. I think creating space in the run game and then moving Dak Prescott off the timing of his connection with those wideouts has to be big, or pass catchers as a whole has to be big for this team as well. Creating space in the run game, nothing has a bigger impact for a rush offense up against a run defense than creating space, right? There's no bigger killer of good run defense than space. And so the Saints need to find a way to continue to implement that. They did a good job of it last week, running for over 30 rushes, averaging more than with Alvin Kamara averaging over 5 yards per carry. That's what you want to see in this game as well. Of course, getting Alvin Kamara and the sort of extension of the run game and the passing game, very important as well in the short game. And then in terms of just keeping Dak Prescott off the timing with those receivers, it's exactly what it sounds like. And so you have to do that by either creating pressure up front with your front 4 or simulated pressure from the second level. And the Saints have been one of the best teams doing that over the course of the past 2 years. And so I would expect them to continue to implement some of their more interesting pressure packages going into this one as well. Those are kind of the things that are most important for me, I think.
And you mentioned Dak Prescott, kind of moving him off the spot. Earlier in Dak Prescott's career, he was fantastic getting outside the pocket. And that's actually where he was the best. As he's aged, he's really just a drop back pocket passer now. And I think, certainly early in the season, he's not going to be willing to take hits and throw the ball down the field. I think that's where he's going to tuck the ball, get 2 yards, slide, or he's just going to dump the ball underneath. That's a big thing. Can the Cowboys protect Dak? If they can, I think they're going to win. If he's taking a bunch of hits and he's having to get outside the pocket, that's where things get a little hairy. For the Cowboys, it's really as simple as play your game. Don't create turnovers. You don't need to do anything special. You are a very talented team at home. This is a Cowboys team that has been fantastic at AT&T Stadium over the last couple of years. Play your game, stay on schedule. The second point that I want to make, Ross, is who's going to step up outside of CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb's going to get his. The Cowboys are going to make sure that he gets his touches. Last week, we saw him get 3 carries. We saw him get him involved in the screen game. He's going to find a way to be impactful. It's who else can step up. Jake Ferguson, not likely to play with an MCL sprain and a bone bruise. Ezekiel Elliott's 85 years old. They don't really have many other options, but for the Cowboys to win this game, somebody else is going to need to take advantage of their matchups. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I want to see them make the Saints travel the entire length of the field. What I get concerned about is Derek Carr making plays down the field like he did in week 1, hitting Rashid Shaheed. If you remember the last time the Cowboys played the Saints, Derek Carr hit Zay Jones down the field, I think 3 times for 150 yards. That's where he's really good, is taking chances down the field. If you limit the big plays, I think the Cowboys defense is going to be fine.
Yeah. That the Derek Carr days with the Raiders, if nothing else, showed you very much that like Derek Carr's ability to throw downfield is something that maybe people kind of underestimate about him. And this offense is looking to bring that out of him. You mentioned the idea of, keeping New Orleans playing so that longer field. The other thing that helped New Orleans a lot against Carolina is how many short fields the defense created for their offense with the takeaways, 3 and outs, all those pieces. I think that's got to be a big thing that we're looking at in this one too. And it goes kind of both ways, right? Like you mentioned, not turning the ball over for Dallas. The Saints, same thing. Of course, every team that wants to win doesn't want to turn the ball over, but also you don't want to turn the ball over in something that's close to plus territory. You don't want to be in a situation where you're giving them a 50-yard field or a 40-yard field or something like that, and a takeaway automatically turns into at least a field goal. You got to be really careful about those things. And so for New Orleans, their defense wants to get them those opportunities. They want to go and get that ball. They've been trained to be aggressive in getting that done. Marcus Robertson, the Saints defensive backs coach, and Joe Woods, their defensive coordinator, have been instrumental in bringing up those takeaway numbers. The Saints hit their franchise low 2 years ago. Those guys showed up. They were outstanding there. And then they got another 4 takeaways or 3 takeaways this past week, depending upon how you look at the blocked punt that Juwan Johnson had. I mean, my goodness, you know what I mean? It's a takeaway, but like, I know people always argue about that, but I think those are going to be big things too, is that sort of takeaway margin between these two teams.
Well, and that's what I'm going to be curious to see is like, do the offenses turtle up and just lean on their defense to win the game? Or do we see both offenses play with some tempo and be like, hey, let's turn this into a shootout type of game because we think our defense can get enough stops to help us win? I think Dallas would like to turn this into a track meet just because they're at home and they've had a really good offense, and Dak Prescott likes playing in those type of games. But I won't be surprised, because it's an early season game, if we see both head coaches, both offensive coordinators go a little bit more into a conservative mindset, at least early on in this one.
Yeah. I mean, that would make a lot of sense, right? Take what the defense is giving you, build the confidence of each quarterback, all those things. I think that those are things you're absolutely going to be looking at. And New Orleans, they're going to kind of want to do the opposite side as the away team, right? They're going to want their defense and their run game to travel so they can slow everything down. And so these two teams are going to be diametrically opposed into what kind of game they're creating. It's almost like if this does turn into a track meet, it's the Cowboys game. If it gets slowed down, it could be the Saints game in a big upset. Like that could be a big time difference in terms of how tempo plays into the result of this one.
It's a big game. We got Tom Brady on the call. Can't wait.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes.
Your Saints fans are going to be very, very excited about Tom Brady. It's quite entertaining. Go check out the Locked On Saints podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can check out the Locked On Cowboys podcast on YouTube and all the same places. Make sure you check out the new Locked On NFL show. Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins do an absolutely fantastic job. 2 shows every single day. Go follow Ross on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. Enjoy the game, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.